Hi, everyone. Welcome today to Career Outcomes Taking Action Together. I'm Wendy Parent-Johnson, the Executive Director of the Sonoran Center for Excellence in Disabilities. And we're so happy to have you here today. So for many of you that were able to join us for this series, welcome back. And for those of you that are joining for the first time today, we're so happy that you're here and we can all continue this conversation together around transition and employment. So as we think about this, today we're going to really look at focusing on employment outcomes. And that's exactly what we need to do, is start with that outcome. We want youth to leave school with the goals of college or employment. So we can't lose sight of this outcome for everything, regardless of what age, where we are in the education system or the adult system. This is our intended outcome to operate from. And you know, many of us that have been doing this for a while, as well as many of you out there, we've been doing it, but we still have poor outcomes, right? People are leaving school, youth with disabilities, and still not entering competitive jobs, careers, and participating in the workforce equally as their non-disabled peers who graduate. So when we think about that, you may be doing all the right things. You know, you may be checking off that you provided a great program, you referred, you did this, you did that, but you still have poor outcomes. So how can we look at this just a little bit differently? And so let's think about this. So instead of just thinking about planning for transition, let's focus on action planning. So we are moving things forward and not just assuming it will be done. It's off our plate. We checked off the list. We're all busy. We did the right things, but let's ensure that it's implemented, that what we want is implemented. And then instead of just checking off the process, let's follow up and ensure that there are outcomes. So action, implementation, and outcomes. That's our mantra. We're all going to get t-shirts so that we can wear them around and join the club of action, implementation, and outcomes. Okay. So I want to start off with, you know, kind of creating this image. This is a young man that I had the pleasure of working with several years ago. And actually was able to co-present just recently. And this person, you know, when I said, what should we all be doing differently as professionals? And what was it that helped you get where you are today? And I'll tell you where that is in a minute. And he said, people took time to talk and listen to me. And now they check in and they help when I need it. This is a person that when I first met him in school in a very rural area, there were no pre-employment transition services being delivered. There were no vocational programming. There was very seldom an employment outcome. Not because of lack of trying, because everybody was doing their part, but the outcomes were not being achieved. So this individual went to community college, experienced COVID interruptions, but currently is employed full-time with the Department of Transportation and receiving benefits. So think about his full team. He's got all the people along his journey that are there and have provided assistance, but they didn't just provide it at that one point in time. They are still available 3 years later. And he is still able to call on them for assistance. So let's think about that. How did this blanket around this person that individual is leading and able to access as needed to help him be successful? So let's look at our community teams in general, okay? When we're talking about transition, the youth, and Richard has mentioned this in a previous webinar, that the youth is in the circle. They're not in the middle, they're not on the outside. They are part of this team equally. They bring their voice and what they want to do. The family is also another equal participant, and the teacher or school personnel, transition specialist, whomever that is. But then let's think about some of the other players. I just did a training the other day, and the case manager / support coordinator, that is a person who's really pivotal, that is likely to be someone that the family has engaged with since they were young. And the information that that person is sharing around employment is critical. And some of the issues with making sure they have accurate information, and they're sharing that from the beginning. So bringing them into our team and making sure that we understand their role and how they can support what we're doing. The rehabilitation counselor, we're going to be talking so much more about that, because they are the ones that help us make employment happen. They are the ones with the resources and the services when the students leave school, as well as services they can provide while they're in school, and we'll be talking more. And then the employers, they are other team member. How do we know what we need to teach? How do we know how to prepare youth for the workforce if we do not understand what employers are looking for? We just did, again, with another training recently, a panel of employers, and we asked them, and I asked this question over and over to employers, and the same answer, no matter where they come from, what state, what business, is, I'm not interested in disability. I want somebody that wants to come to my job to do the work and enjoys being there. I can teach some of the technical skills. This is what I want. But we get fixated that employers don't want to hire because of disability or because of some things that we preconceive are essential. So talk to employers. And then there could be others. Those are the general ones that most individuals with disabilities should have around their team. But think about some of the others that may be involved. Perhaps there's mental health services or behavioral health services. If youth are in foster care, perhaps foster care, benefits specialists or benefits planning. So thinking about all of the people, whether they come to the team meetings or you interact with them, these are all people that play a key role and can help be a resource and support what is going on to prepare youth for employment. So while we're in school, let's think. The first webinar we did was around youth leading, youth gaining those skills to really take an active role in their futures and their employment. And the second webinar was focused a lot on collaboration and how we can all work together to do that, even though they address some other areas. So when we think about this, when we're actually moving to employment, think about the school. We want to teach youth self-advocacy, self-determination, self-efficacy, as Richard had mentioned, and work-based learning opportunities. So we're giving youth a chance to be out in the community and learning for themselves how to interact in the business world, how to determine things that they like or they don't like, and to have those opportunities to speak up and to communicate and to participate. And the key factor there that we have to remember is that youth need these opportunities, but they need to practice them. It's not a one-time deal. They went out to work at one job and that's the end of it. I had one individual that I worked with that had many, many seizures a day. And the school suggested that they stay back and not go on job sites until seizures were under control. And the family said, that's not going to help her because we can't ever control these seizures 100% or be sure that we will. So what we need to do is have her be in those work environments and start learning how to convey to coworkers that you're having a seizure or when you come out of a seizure, and what kind of environments are most conducive. So think about that. All of those things that we say somebody can't do before they go out and do the work-based learning. Let's do it and teach them there. And lots of opportunities and lots of time to practice. We also need to start increasing family awareness. Start teaching them about what's possible and what you expect and what they expect around employment. Increase their knowledge of the adult system and share what the student is doing out on these work sites. But bringing them in early on so that they start seeing employment. There are too many communities where employment isn't happening and families may not even know what kind of services and supports that could assist their son or daughter with becoming employed. Developing those business relationships. Our team of employment personnel always say it's the relationships that is most critical. Building those relationships and those experiences, bringing the business into your classroom and having them interact and help to educate students. And then connecting people with adult services, helping them get referrals and connections early on so that they can start doing what it is that they need to do, and you can learn what it is that you can do on your end to provide that information to them. So I purposely thought of this word together with Richard about about transitioning. Think about this. This is movement. So we're going from school, we're transitioning to the adult services. And if you see this illustration to the right, it's multiple cups, if you will, bowls, 5 of them, and they tip. So the first one is small and it tips to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And each time, each cup begins to grow and fill more. And that's what we want to think about with that image. When we're transitioning, we're not just handing off and our role is done, but we're adding to that cup. Going back to the original student that I mentioned, the cup keeps getting bigger and the resources and the supports keep expanding. So the transitions are also not a one-time situation. And so when we think about transitioning, going back from the connecting to the adult services, as school personnel, one of the things that's so important is conveying what we expect, what the family expects, what the youth expects, making sure that they understand employment is the goal of everyone and what the school program has been working towards. I was in a meeting not too long ago with a family and a young adult and some adult services. And the youth said, I want a job. And the adult service said, you know, we have these options such as day programs where you can go and start getting ready for work. And the family said, we want competitive employment. And the adult provider said, well, then you could go to a group model and you can continue working there with the provider in a large group of people, and then you can get ready for employment. It was a continuation until we finally had to keep interrupting and saying, we are talking about employment. And so you need to make sure that what you're connecting to also has the same expectations and visions that you've been working towards while in school, and communicating the information. We share templates about the work-based learning, resumes, also the vision boards that show a picture of who this person is. And ideally, the young person can be conveying those themselves to the adult services, but ensuring that the information about those experiences, those opportunities, what you learn from them is being conveyed. You know, I often receive a referral and it'll say something like, the individual can only do one task, or they can only work for 30 minutes. And my first question is why? There is no reason why, but in school, maybe they weren't expected to work more than 30 minutes, or the students said they didn't want to work after 30 minutes, but maybe that's been going on for years. How often have we pushed them to increase how long they work? How often have we taught them to do 3, 4, 5, 6 tasks? Because in school is the place to do that. We can teach them on the job site, but it takes longer. And sometimes with the adult services, the funding may not be there in the same way during the school programming. So provide these opportunities. And then bringing youth in and having them be a part, having them tell you what they like, what they don't like, whether it's by verbal or other means of communication, and helping to put that into the format to share with the adult services. Like we said, the work-based learning resumes or the vision boards are wonderful, wonderful tools that youth get very active in, and the self-advocacy planner that we have. And then once we transition, following up. Did they get referred? Was the referral accepted? Is the person getting services? And making sure that there wasn't some gap in there where they fell through the cracks or were denied services or something happened. One person I worked with, when I did check up, there was no services. And when I asked, the adult service provider said they never followed up to our letter. And when we checked, it was not in the person's primary language. So we need to make sure that we're understanding why people aren't connecting. So the primary place to begin the employment journey is with vocational rehabilitation. So the transitioning, the movement from school, adding to a bowl to our resources is vocational rehabilitation. As we discussed before, there's the option of pre-employment transition services, which can be provided by the school or by an outside provider, and ensuring that these are really helping the students learn the skills that they need. I've seen some pre-ed services that are just worksheets or continuing to just practice interviewing with a fellow student. Let's try and push that more to giving them additional opportunities, again, to participate in the real world. Our vocational rehabilitation, our state agency, which is called Rehabilitation Services Administration here in Arizona, has really worked with us for a robust pre-eds program where we're working with schools to help them build capacity for work-based learning, because that was the most underutilized pre-ed service. But in addition to that, offering a paid summer work opportunity for youth, which has been just an amazing opportunity for people to experience real work for the 120 hours during their summer vacation. So there's some innovative ways that the pre-ed services can be delivered. Vocational rehabilitation should be engaging the school and the youth and the family in the information, the experiences, the expectations, to understand and not have to just completely start over, and having the information that can be helpful as they plan their plan for employment and delivery of services. I hear this, I cannot believe I hear this still to this day, of referrals being denied because of someone being too severe or unemployable. And just last week, I happened to see an example of that. So what we want with vocational rehabilitation is to process that referral, open the case, develop the individual plan for employment, and arrange the employment services that will assist that young person with becoming employed. So understanding that vocational rehabilitation is going to need some of the information that you are the expert for. You have been instructing this student, you've been out on job sites, you've learned how they learn, how they work, what supports they need. This is so helpful. And all of the insights that you have through your experiences for the years with a student can really benefit vocational rehabilitation. So here we go again, another transitioning point. So vocational rehabilitation determines the services, and then they refer to a provider or a vendor, depending on what they're called in your state, who actually delivers the services, the supported employment, customized employment, or job placement services. So the provider needs to get to know that youth. So as we're transitioning, our bowls are filling up. We're gaining more people that are there to provide support. But what if Voc Rehab hasn't shared all that information that you had with the provider? So see, there's multiple transitioning points. So how can we make sure that this information is making it through all of these transitions to the people that can benefit from it? Think about that as you're preparing what it is that you're sharing with them. So the work-based learning resumes can be really helpful. There can be other formats, but perhaps developing the relationships with the providers too, and not just vocational rehabilitation, so you can be at that table and conveying that information. Or maybe vocational rehabilitation can mention or purposefully share what you shared with them. So the provider is going to get to know the youth, assist them with finding a competitive job, an individual job. I still see things that are less than employment, that many definitions around supported and customized employment, many of them that are less than competitive. What we're talking about here is an individual job where they are paid by the business and they work full-time or part-time, competitive job. So think about what is needed for them to find that job. So then the provider is going to provide the training, support, accommodations, many of those things that perhaps you shared that you found to be important during the school years when they were out on work-based learning sites. And then arranging the ongoing support, like for example, with the student I mentioned, how is the support going to be arranged to assist that person with keeping their job as things change, as COVID occurs, as other kinds of changes on the job site or in a person's life? And with supported employment, having the 2 visits a month has been an excellent way for people to be able to keep their jobs for long periods of time. So again, we're going experiencing another transitioning here often to perhaps another funder who pays that same provider, or what I keep hearing more recently out in the field is that it's transitioning to a completely another provider. And so again, we have another person in the mix with additional resources if we are integrating and working all of these together. If not, think of all the points in time where there could be a breakdown, where there could be a gap, where something could fall through the cracks. And when we think about this, it really sheds some light on where a problem can occur. But if we look at it in a positive way, look at all of these bowls that we're filling up and all those extra resources we could tap into if we understood what it is that they can provide and we had those relationships. Okay, so our role with all of this is to contribute to employment services by helping with the job match. This is such a critical piece. And by doing that, you can share all those experiences. You can share the context of when they occurred and how they occurred and how that student learns best. And I think with this day and age of this workforce post-COVID, we have to include the technology skills that this person has, the experiences that they have had perhaps for accessing technology and learning how to participate in a virtual world. And then what supports did you find helpful? What compensatory strategies, checklists, and visual stories or things that can help them do their job? But also, what did they like? What do they dislike? What is their work culture preferences? You know, I oftentimes will see somebody that they like cars, so their whole work experience in school for 3 or 4 years may be at a car dealership. Well, you know, they like cars, but do they like to do other things? Let's explore and try them. But even if they do like cars, all dealerships are not the same. So what are the work cultures that are most preferable for that person? So then addressing our gaps, okay? We showed where there could be so many, and there's obviously more. But the things that we've experienced the most is, you know, there's services that aren't available, or we don't have administrative support. There's staff shortages, and now it's even worse, whether it's in the school or the adult service world, but high turnover. Maybe we don't have providers, or maybe people are denied services, or they're recommended for things that are less than work, or that we have geography challenges. Maybe there's no transportation, maybe it's rural. What we did a big statewide study on transition about a year and a half ago. And one of the things that came up the most as a positive, but also as a negative in other communities, was communication and coordination being so critical, but a challenge because it was unclear in all of those big resources that we just talked about of who was going to assume that role. So think about who that is. Is it the school person? Is it the rehab counselor? Is it the provider? But think about in your community who might play that role to help connect all of these pieces, keep people engaged, and help avoid some of those gaps so that we understand our communities. And so thinking about this last piece, if we operate as a community, as we were told up front by this student, and we think about the bowls filling up in our community around this individual, as well as our larger community for transition in general, what can we do to help think about fixing those gaps? And I think we have to look at it that way. And where we've had the most success is we start earlier. You know, if we start early, it gives us more time to perhaps address something that's specific to that individual or community, and teaching to the problem instead of just saying, there isn't something, or this person can't do something. Let's teach it. We know how to teach. Let's use our task analysis, our systematic instruction, and teach the person to access those skills that they need that eliminates the problem, or at least has it manageable. Maybe you perform additional role. We've seen some situations where maybe a para or a staff person somewhere takes on a role so that we can get started with work-based learning with 1 or 2 people, 1 referral, making things move and helping to figure out what we need to do to address those challenges, and sharing our resources, but advocate for change. Don't be creative. Some of our best ideas have come from, okay, we need to solve this. What are we going to do? Let's give it a try. And we've done some very creative virtual work amidst the current situation with COVID, and so many other ways to find those opportunities. And another option is to have the person go to work before graduation. And in summary here, when we look at the key points, if you don't walk away with anything else, these 3 red boxes from the 3 webinars, basically a summary of key points. We need to provide youth opportunities and give them the chance to practice, 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 so that they start learning those skills and more about themselves and having the opportunity to communicate them. Building relationships and collaborating together. We illustrated that here, and Richard's going to talk next, so I am going to let him elaborate on that. But then monitoring quality and outcomes. It's not enough for all of us to do our role in isolation. We need to follow up. We need to make sure that what we are assuming, what we are planning is actually happening, and those true employment outcomes are being achieved. So I am going to turn it over to Richard. So would you mind going from here, please? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Wendy. So, I have to say that knowing her all these years and working with her specifically on some of these activities the last few years, or several really, it's hard not to be enthusiastic about thinking about things in new and fresh ways when you listen to Wendy. So even I get jazzed. So I want to talk about just a couple of examples, but so I want to set the stage, some practical examples, couple premises. From a sociological perspective, I've indicated in the past that I'm a sociologist, and I think in that perspective, it's not just a few institutions and organizations and agencies that, but all institutions, we're all social constructors. All institutions, organizations, and agencies develop and reinforce their own missions and their own procedures and activities. They have their own agendas. And they strongly tend toward viewing and working with other people, with others, other agencies, other institutions, other people in general, from their own perspectives. And so as a result of that, and so no one should be singled out in this process, and we haven't done that. It's critical to think about activities and practices where we can create a more comprehensive, a more shared, and we talk a lot about shared space and creating shared meanings and shared goals. It doesn't mean bring your 2 goals and then to my 2 goals, and now we have 4 goals. It means let's think of a goal where somehow we creatively respond to the goal, bringing the resources that Wendy is often referred to together, and create some new shared vision and some shared activities and shared actions. And you've heard a lot in reference to those kinds, that way of thinking. And I want to get a little more concrete about that. So we'll shift to the next slide, which says, I'm going to give you 2 examples. And when I think, and this is tough for me because I think in lots of details and lots of contextual comments come into mind. So when I think about the 4 or 5 years of Soaring to New Heights and the 4 or 5 years of the transition activities, focusing and lately on the Transition AHEAD Roundtable, it's tough to synthesize and come up with just a couple of examples of collaborative practice, but that's what I'm going to do. I might take my best shot at it. I'll be succinct and maybe leave some things out. There's so much to talk about, but I want to share a couple of examples. In particular, so in one thing, I want you to recognize that the Soaring to New Heights was both a curriculum. We developed a content, a semester-long set of lessons with its own scope, how many lessons, what kind, and sequence. What sequence do we teach these lessons in so they hopefully cumulatively build toward the outcome of having improved transition from these young kids from high school into employment. So where did we begin? A couple of key things here. From the very beginning, we outlined, defined who are the key agencies, who are the organizations that are most intimately involved in this overall transitioning with the verb process. And then we engaged key representatives from all those agencies And over the 4 or 5 years of the Soaring to New Heights project, working together, we identified early on we needed to at least come together as an entire group, key representatives, bring us together twice annually to review the success of the program and to develop new actions that would hopefully improve the outcomes. Now, even if the outcomes are already good, how can we do it better? How can we create more successful, more holistic transitions? Because it isn't a series of transition, it's an entire transitioning process. And so what outcomes, is our implementation good? Are we doing things that we think will implement this overall idea? Does that mean bringing more of us together in more situations, or more of us together in terms of the agencies involved and participating together? And are we hitting, once we've identified what success kind of looks like, are there measures along the way, sort of benchmarks, interim outcomes, they call it sometimes, that we can look at in these meetings and say, are we hitting these? As an honest statement of the first year of the Soaring to New Heights curriculum, we had some, I don't think overly grandiose goals, but so they didn't seem to be that challenging to meet, but we weren't hitting the points. Our kids didn't feel like they were competent. We didn't feel like our kids were competent as teachers and vocational specialists, counselors and parents and families. We didn't feel like our kids were getting as far along in this process as we had hoped. So that's when I mentioned in a previous webinar that we went back to say, well, really the issue isn't about helping them do these kinds of transitions, but to help them recognize that they are in fact themselves capable of doing these transitions, that they are in themselves, before they can become or self-determined, they need to see themselves as capable. So we added, as a result of that review of the first year, we went not completely back to the drawing table, but we went back and said, how can we build self-efficacy? How can we embed that into this entire curriculum? So that's the process we used. Now, it literally, at iterative state levels, moments in time, over the course of the first couple of years in particular, we brought key players together to develop the content. And when I say it's not, so we didn't bring it wasn't just the teachers and the researcher educators like me developing the course content. We had a draft outline, but we thought of who else is involved in this. Well, the vocational specialists are involved in this, and the parents, for crying out loud, the parents are involved in this. So we had work groups that brought together teachers, parents, and transition specialists, vocational counselors, and looked at the course content and the course activities. In this case in particular, it was the teachers and vocational counselors. But as I was thinking about this, listening to Wendy, we also engaged parents in the process. In fact, at the end of the first year, the second and third years, we implemented the Soaring to New Heights. We started every semester by bringing the parents in. We incentivized, we had free pizza on an outcome, an open house to Soaring to New Heights. We invited the parents of all these kids to a class, in meeting at the high school, in the classroom, and saying, here's the curriculum. This is what we're going to be teaching your kids. Here are our goals. They're going to bring this stuff home. You are the living context that they engage in every day, or not engage in, as lots of high school kids don't engage in a lot of family dynamics, except at least in depth. We needed to let the families know that they too were involved in this. And if they had questions then or in the future, we were there to talk with them. So that was an important thing, is bringing the key players together. And a result of that, honestly, is that in particular, the vocational counselors, literally we built into the curriculum, the teaching curriculum, would come to the high schools, come to the classrooms, learn the firsthand names of all the students in that class for that semester. In times, there were 2 or 3 lessons during the course of the semester that the counselor and the teacher co-taught the activities. Or a couple of times, the class would go out to the Voc Rehab agency and meet the people, meet Voc Rehab, recognize where the building is, what that looked like, what these people, what everybody was doing there. And they were hosted by the vocational counselor who took them around and showed them, here are the vocational rehabilitation activities. Here's our VR office, and you're a part of that. It was an exciting time, in particular, because what emerged is that teachers began to think just a little bit like a vocational rehabilitation counselor, or like a voc ed counselor, or a transition specialist. They began to think, well, okay, now I understand their goals. In the reverse, the transition specialist or the vocational counselor who had met those and come into classroom, they began to see what the classroom was like, the teacher's experience, what the teacher was trying to do and what they were up against, and how they could support one another. So they began to include, in a much more conscious way and purposeful way, the kinds of goals and expectations that they each had. And that allowed for a much more dynamic process. So, Transition AHEAD Roundtable. Couple of key things here in the roundtable that are important to recognize that we did, that in some ways we learned good lessons from the Soaring to New Heights process, the collaborative process, because we all recognize that we're having a collective impact on this kid's life. So in the Transition AHEAD Roundtable, what we began with, the bringing together of the key and integrating the key agencies and the family into the activities of the roundtable day. We didn't, from the jump, we have never left them out in the planning and organization and participation of the actual day itself. So that's really an important recognition, is who's going to, so in the case of the Transition AHEAD Roundtable that we're doing here, a day-long roundtable here in not South Dakota, we're in Tucson, Arizona, where it's 95 and the wind's blowing, dust. We invited people from the outside agencies. Consider the word, in my phrase, even outside agencies. We're trying to bring them in. We're trying to bring them into this process, but we think of them as outside agencies. It's the idea of bringing those in, and so we have a common sense of what's going on. We brought people in and we helped them, and then we used their participation during the day. And that includes family members. You can't, that's a part of the equation that routinely gets left out. The young people that we're working with, the emerging adults, are emerging from the social context of their families. Their families need to be brought along as best we can do it. Their families need to recognize what's going on in their lives and to meet that challenge. So then during the roundtable day, there are 2 other pieces that are important, that are just sort of examples of keys here. We created during the day live, or in some cases virtual, opportunities for the young adults to use with us in very safe environments with our team members, to use their own voice. We asked them questions and we listened to what they said. We asked them and literally put them on the spot in gentle and time-spaced ways to express themselves. If they needed extra time, we gave them the extra time to begin to use their voices in these activities during the day. And sometimes that's the first time they've been asked to comment about an activity, not just participated in it, but to talk about it and to express themselves, what they're thinking and feeling about the different activities. One other event that we bring to bear here in the end of this roundtable day, it culminates in a session where we, once again, we bring family members together with the teachers and hope in some situations, transition specialists at the end of the day. So they listen to the young person make a presentation about the key things in their experience of that day. They get that chance and they're put on a spot, again, in a safe environment, a supported environment by the team, to express themselves. And this experience, and they often articulate the fact that that was the best part of the day, that they could be heard, that they could talk out loud, and they knew that people were listening. That's the impact on the young person. The impact on the family members, and hopefully on the teachers and transition specialists, is now they have some common content. They have some common experiences of what this young person is saying, and even sometimes experiencing for the first time things that they are capable of doing because they were given the opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities. Or if they didn't have them, we could say, okay, this is part of what you need to learn, and we're going to help you figure out how to do that in everyday world life experiences. All right, so shared activities, creating in the projects and the work we're doing together is these collective impact teams or collaboratives, whatever phrase you want to use to describe this. They result in each participant, and I'm talking about teachers, the young person themselves, and the family members, seeing one another in a different light. Wendy and I have presented on this before. This process changes everybody. It changes the teacher's perspective on what they can do, the transition or vocational specialist on what they are capable, and create a much more common and complete perspective on what's going on and how we can go forward. And then you can find better ways to support the intended goals, because now you have a clue as to what they might be that the young adult has. And then you can bring together the young adult's goals along with the goals of the organization. And the common goal of this as a transitioning process that engages all of us as agencies and individuals in this comprehensive experience of this young adult moving forward in their own lives.
So thank you, Richard. And now I'd like to introduce my colleague and co-presenter here, Gabe Martinez, who's going to share some of his experiences with all of us. So Gabe, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Okay. I'm a project aide in Peer Navigator for the Sonoran Center of Excellence of Disabilities. For over 2 years, I'm a positive worker. I am shy and friendly. I help with young adults to find jobs. I help with projects and webinars. I help train healthcare professionals for their future careers.
Yes, and it wasn't that long ago, Gabe, when you were also in high school. So can you share some of the things that you learned that were helpful to you? So thinking back when you were in high school, what did you want to do when you graduated?
Go to college. I might take a class in the fall. Something like in fitness, working at the fitness center, in school, sports trainer assistant, and working in a fitness office.
So it sounds like you like sports, Gabe, huh?
Right.
And what's your favorite?
Football.
Yeah. Okay, so do you remember what helped you make that choice when you were in high school?
Right. Sports training courses in my junior and senior year in high school. Work with the school trainer and also in the project church, I work at the University of Arizona Rec Center. I like students and fitness.
Yeah, so Tell us a little bit more about the vocational training that you had in high school and how did that help you with getting ready for work?
I took the sports training classes and worked with the sports trainer. I helped the trainer to at the sporting events, helped in the training room, wrapping injuries and keeping the training bags stocked. And the speech teacher helped me speak, and working with the trainers helped me to know where things go for jobs I put in my resume to find jobs.
All right. So did you also have the chance to learn self-advocacy skills while you were in school? And how did you learn that? And you mentioned about your IEP meetings and other ways that you had the chance to learn. You want to tell us about that?
Right. I went to my IEP meetings while I was in grade school, and I helped decide that services I needed. I had an aide from kindergarten to 8th grade. As I got older, I told the aide that I need to help with. When I went to high school, I decided I don't need the aide anymore. I did well, and I had 3.0 grade point in high school. I went out for wrestling and won a starting spot on a JV team, and I earned a varsity letter, and I was a co-captain for the team my senior year. I gave exceptional stocks to the team before each match.
Okay, thank you. So you've also mentioned that other things that were helpful for you were doing chores and volunteer work. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Right. Being responsible to get up every morning and go to the school bus on time, make sure my homework was done every night. Chores I was responsible for doing, collecting trash, keeping my bedroom and my bathroom clean, and emptying the dishwasher. I volunteered at different businesses. I learned people skills, office skills, and work responsibilities. I volunteered at the hospital and also leadership nonprofit agency.
Okay. So were you connected with vocational rehabilitation and adult services? And how did they help you?
I did not get vocational rehab services until after I was done with Project Church. They provided a job coach, but I learned the most in Project Church. The job coach went with me on interviews and when I was hired by a grocery store. The job coach stayed with me at my job for about a month when they were done.
Okay. So you told us that you're a project aide and peer navigator now. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what you do with your job, at your job?
Right. My favorite part of my job is being on meetings because I get to meet new people and I can share what I'm doing at the Sonoran Center with them to make them think if they have any questions about my role working at the Sonoran Center. I tell them what I do, like emails, projects, presenting at webinars and helping future doctors. I hope they think about what they can do right after high school.
Great. So how do you help others with finding a job when in your role?
I help with others to find a perfect job for their skills and match their skills to have that job. As a self-advocacy member, we talk about agencies to support the kids who have disabilities.
All right. So you have a lot of thoughts about finding for other youth that are interested in work. So what do you think is the most important tip to share?
Right. Don't give up. Don't give up on work. Give a chance to find to a job you want.
Excellent. And Gabe, you shared before that you had a job in a grocery store and didn't like that job or it didn't fit for you. You remember about that and what you did?
Right.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. It'd be like helpful for each one, or like having problems, and I'm there to help them.
Mhm. And so you always share that it's such that it's okay to change jobs, to change your mind till you find the one that you like you have now, correct?
Correct.
So in terms of teachers and rehabilitation counselors, how can they best help youth become employed?
Right. Teachers should encourage their students to get a that they want to do. Sometimes they will try to look for more challenging jobs than the fast food, grocery store, restaurant, kitchen work, and also central service job. Job training courses should include big businesses in the community. We can do a lot if we are just given the chance and support. High schools should have a mentorship program where the business takes a student with disability and put them to work in a couple afternoons in a week.
Thank you, Gabe. We appreciate you sharing everything. And through all of your work and experiences, you just received a new appointment. Do you want to tell us what that is?
Right. I was appointed for a new Biden committee known as People with Disability with Intellectual Committee.
So you are part of that advisory group to the administration. So thank you, Gabe. So I want to thank our team, both with the employment team that we have, as well as our overall Sonoran Center, amazing people that do all of these things that we talked about. And here is our contact information. I appreciate all that every one of you out there are doing right now. And we hope that some of what we shared through this webinar and the other two in the series are helpful to you. We would love for you to stay in touch and continue the conversation if we can be helpful or answer questions. Here is our book where much of the information that we've discussed and many of the tools are located. And we really thank you for joining us and the opportunity to connect with you all and talk about transition and employment. And want to thank Virginia Commonwealth University, the Rehabilitation Research and Training Center on Employment of Persons with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities for this opportunity and the chance to work together. So thanks, everyone.